Delighted to welcome to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. What an absolute pleasure to be here. I love to talk about the future, but I want to share this slide first. This is what got me into my life. This is Blade Runner. This came out in 1982 when I was 13 years old, and this blew my mind. The reason I became an engineer, the reason I became a technologist is very clearly this movie. What is interesting is this movie came out in 1982, but it was actually set in 2019. So my entire life, I have been looking forward to this moment and understand my incredible disappointment that none of this has materialized. We don't have flying cars, we're not hunting down replicants, the buildings don't look like that, so in front of you stands an incredibly disappointed 50-year-old man. The reality in 2019 is this. I have two children at home, 20 and 16, and in our house, the quality of me as a father is completely correlated to the quality of the Wi-Fi signal in our house. If the Wi-Fi is good, I'm okay. And if there's a tiny hiccup, which gives a millisecond interruption in their YouTube stream, they question the fact if I even have a degree in computer science. That is 2019. We live in a world where digital has become normal, where we're constantly connected, where disruption becomes a normal word. And I believe we're bracing ourselves because we're still in the very early stages. We are truly at crossroads. We're at a crossroads now where technology is changing economy in major ways, and we've talked about that in the last couple of years. It's now a crossroads where we see that it hits many different sectors. And I take retail as an example. Retail is transformed in front of our very eyes. But that is just the beginning. We're at a crossroads now where, for example, politics and technology are colliding. This is one of my favorite moments. What you see here is this is Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, and he was the only friend of Donald Trump in Silicon Valley. I think he was the only one who believed that Trump would win. I think he was the only Republican in Silicon Valley. But what happened is the moment that Trump was elected, he called a meeting of the gods of Silicon Valley, and he asked Peter Thiel, his friend, to do that. Now we know that Thiel is also the founder of Palantir, one of the scariest AI companies in the world. We now know that Palantir probably worked with Cambridge Analytica to help get Trump elected, so it was a tense meeting, brilliantly shown by this wonderful picture. And if you see the way that the CEO of Apple, Mr. Tim Apple, stares into the lens, you can see that this was a very awkward meeting. It's not just politics, it's geopolitics. We're now in a world where China and the US are battling it out. It's not a trade war, it's a tech war. The new technology giants out of China are much more impressive than anything I've ever seen from the West. And it's now a fascinating journey which is shaping the world. And that is just the warm-up act. We're now in an environment where, for example, biology is being disrupted. These two babies were born end of last year. They were genetically modified with CRISPR-Cas9, a technology that's only 7 years old. And these two babies were born, and when they were put onto the earth, they were HIV resistant because of genetic engineering. That is wow, but really scary. And I think we're now entering a world where technology is changing society, where true disruptions is not about cats on Instagram, but when we talk about healthcare and food and agriculture. And I believe we are privileged bastards to be part of that. And many people in my profession are quite dystopian. I'm a perennial optimist, but it's up to you to figure out what the future is going to be. Many people say, my God, this is scary. Will we cope? And if you look at human history, I mean, we are extremely good at change. If you look at the entire human history and you would call that a day, then the last 300 years is just the last 2 minutes of that human day. And in the last 2 minutes, we've seen amazing changes. 300 years ago, we had the social revolution, which the French still call the French Revolution, but yeah, they're French. But the outcome was spectacular because it changed the way we thought about nations. I mean, the direct outcome of this wonderful thing that happened 300 years ago is basically the state, the way we run countries. 150 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution with a huge impact on work. This is one of my favorite slides. What you see here is the amount of people agriculture in light blue in the beginning and in the end of the Industrial Revolution. Countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Spain, we went from 85% farmers to less than 5% in 100 years. But what was the direct outcome of the Industrial Revolution? It was basically the firm. The way we run companies is still something that comes from 150 years ago. And we're now in the beginning of something really new. I don't think this is a 4.0 thing. I think we're in the beginning of something really, really new. And we're still in the very early stages. This is one of my favorite images. This is President Clinton and his faithful assistant Al Gore connecting the school to the information superhighway in 1996. That's only 20 years old. And we're now beginning to see where social basically gave us the state and industrial gave us the firm. We're now seeing that this new gives us empowerment. Consumers are empowered like never before. Employees are empowered, citizens are empowered. And I believe we are privileged to witness exactly that. But your task is quite difficult because your visibility is getting less and the intelligence you need to make decisions is actually increasing. And let's talk about visibility first. What is your radar screen to understand and make sense? We have no idea what happened yesterday. We have no idea what happened last night. And we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Our visibility is constantly being shifted. And that we have to innovate in our companies is quite clear. But how good are you at picking up the signals? This is one of my favorite videos. This is a video from 1911. Where this is a Flatiron building, you've all been there. And what you see here is New York in 1911, filled with horses and carriages, until the magical moment that the very first automobile rolls into New York. What would your reaction have been if you're only used to horses and you see your first automobile? Would you be excited? Would you be scared? Or would you be angry? This man was very angry. Ed Klein, obviously German, sold horses in New York. And he hated the hype around the automobile. As a matter of fact, Ed was so mad at the hype of the automobile, he put this ad in the New York Times to convince people not to fall into the trap of the automobile, but just to keep on buying horses. And after 100 years, there's only one conclusion: Ed was an idiot. But if you were there and you owned a stable, would you have seen the potential and turned your stable into a garage? Or would you have said, nah, I'm gonna milk this horse business for as long as I can? And many companies are exactly in the same predicament. It's not about technology, it's about change. It's about your willingness and capability to actually do something. I wrote a book, Digital is the New Normal, a few years ago. We're beginning to see that, and this is absolutely the evolution we've seen in the last 10 years. And even now, we see the surprises. Last week was fantastic. Jennifer Aniston went on Instagram for the very first time. Within 24 hours, she had 10 million followers. She's up to 15 million today. If you have kids, you will probably understand this new normal even better. PewDiePie became the first person to break 100 million subscribers on YouTube this summer, and what he does is play video games online. If you have kids who play Fortnite, well, this is their hero. Kyle, 16 years old, won the Fortnite World Championship this summer, and he took home $3 million in prize money. That's more than Wimbledon or the Masters. And of course, last week was very special if you had kids who played Fortnite, because this happened. It was the end. And all of a sudden, Fortnite just evaporated into a huge black hole, and millions of players around the world said, oh my God. And then it was just a big PR stunt to launch the second version. We are in the new normal. And I have no idea how old you are, but I was drawn into this when my father came home 35 years ago, hooked this to the TV, and introduced that. And that was a wow moment for me. Who remembers that? Just, wow, this is the Geriatric Society meeting here in Paris. But it's fascinating to see this evolution in 35 years. What if we're only in the beginning of this journey? What if we're only halfway in the transition? And what is beginning to be very clear now is that technologists like me always get it wrong. I mean, it's consumers who started to use technology in ways we could have never imagined. It's fascinating to see now how this has transformed our lives in a very short period of time. But really interesting, this has become the most natural gesture for an entirely new generation. And we're in this new normal. It might be actually the never normal. Things are changing faster than ever before. And it's now almost like a virus. Disruption is a virus that is infecting every single market out there. And I take retail as an example. The last couple of years, we've talked a lot about the unicorns, these fabled companies that become billion-dollar valuations. I became more interested in the phoenix, companies that can reinvent themselves. The phoenix for me is much more interesting, and the reason is very simple. Most of you in this room will never be a unicorn, but some of you might be a phoenix. Let's take retail as an example. And retail is being transformed, and we see this every single day. And if you have children, you will understand this. The Atlantic talks about the touchscreen generation. This is my favorite Santa Claus letter of a young girl. Dear Santa, how are you? I'm good. Here is what I want for Christmas. And then the Amazon URL of what that child wants to have under the Christmas tree. This is the new normal in retail today. And we know who the unicorn is. I mean, my God, Amazon, if you've been in an Amazon Go, it changes the whole experience. It's using online meets offline. They bought Whole Foods for $13.4 billion. They're constantly getting into innovation. Look at what they do with online groceries and fresh, and also in logistics. Prime is becoming a huge player in logistics, constantly innovating with customers to deliver new types of environments, new types of experience. And Amazon is not just the innovator, they're also the innovator in how we work. They employ 470,000 robots. Amazon is the largest robot army in the world. That is the unicorn. But about a year and a half ago, I was invited to the other side. I was invited to do a keynote like this to Walmart. And I'd never been to their headquarters. They are in Bentonville, Arkansas. And this has redefined my idea of the absolute middle of nowhere. It was fascinating to go there. But Walmart is the largest retailer in the world. And I believe they could be the phoenix in retail. Walmart is investing heavily in innovation. They put these huge pickup towers, magnificent robots that you can order something on Walmart.com, come in, scan this, and this robot will deliver your parcel in less than 10 seconds. This is the Walmart in-home delivery, which they launched this summer. If you want to have somebody from Walmart and you've bought it online to actually stock your refrigerator, they unlock your smart door, they get in, they will come into your house, and they will completely fill your refrigerator with what you bought on Walmart. It's fabulous to see that. And you can follow everything they do on the app. Some people say, I don't want people in my house. Fine. They have robots for that as well. These are the driverless vans. They work together with Ford. This is the Digit robots. They drive to your house autonomously. They step out and put the parcel on your doorstep. Fascinating to see. I have no idea what your reaction would be if you see that walking down the street. In the stores, they are innovating like crazy. These are the bossa novas. And the moment that the customers are thinning out, they start to roam the aisle, see what needs to be done. They alert their robot buddies, and an army of robots comes in to make the entire store ready for the first customer at 3 o'clock in the morning. 0 humans involved. And I say, wow. This is a company that isn't going to die down. This is a company that buckles up, and they need to. If you look at retail behavior in the US, 2007, 2018, you can clearly see that Amazon is the unicorn that challenges. They need to react. And Walmart says we need to combine offline with online. And I believe this is wonderful to see a company like that transform itself. Walmart could be the phoenix. But the scary part is that it's fascinating to see an organization like that reinvent itself and be ready for disruption. But what is truly scary when you look at it is we're in a situation now where Walmart is the largest employer in the world. There's only one organization bigger than Walmart, that's the Chinese army, but that's not a normal commercial operation. But if you look at it and you can see what it does and the amount of disruption it will have in the workforce, and the scary part, if you've been in a Walmart, the chances that we can reskill these people to become blockchain experts and AI developers is relatively small. This is not just technology changing economy, this is technology changing labor. This is technology changing social. This is technology changing society. And that is going to be your challenge. I love the opening of this book. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times, and I think this is exactly where we are. And in my opinion, it's only going to get more intense. In the next couple of years, we have cocktails of technology colluding and working together to accelerate the pace of change. These are my 4 ingredients of that cocktail. We're going to have platforms, data, artificial intelligence, and automation changing the game. And if you look at platforms, this is now a new 21st century economic reality. The strange thing about these new digital platforms is they seem to grow into very dominant category kings. Take Google, for example, here in Europe, has a market share of 98% in search. That's a category king. Who's number 2? Nobody cares. That's a category king. And we seem to frown upon that. Take Android, for example. Who has an iPhone? Just raise your hand. Who has an iPhone? That's most of you. That's because you're rich, okay? But 87% of the world population, like me, has an Android phone. And last year, the European Commissioner for Competition, Margrethe Vestager, gave Google, the parent of Android, a 5 billion fine because it was seen as an unfair economy of scale. But if you look at capital or inventory, why would I book a hotel not on Booking.com if they have all the inventory? Or user base, why would I join a social network if all my friends are on Facebook? Platforms are a new economic reality. And if you look at it, many people say, oh my God, these platforms, they're attracting users. No, wrong. It's the other way around. We do it every single day. We're feeding the beasts. I take Waze as an example. I live in Belgium. You cannot drive in Belgium without Waze. I love Waze. And every time I use Waze, I feed the beast. Because what happens is I give Waze information, they get smarter, more intelligent, and they give me value. I feed the beasts. And at the beginning, these beasts are nice and warm and cuddly, and then we feed it too much data, and we have to give it a 5 billion fine. What if this is not special, but actually a normal mode of behavior? Today, we see that these platforms are causing the traditional players to become what is known as dumb pipes. And this is the core question. If you want to survive as a company, you have to ask yourself this question: are you essential to your customers? And are you relevant? And we now see that that is no longer the same thing. And many people say, oh God, these new players, they're really scary. We have to do something. Elizabeth Warren is one of the 3,000 people in the US fighting against Trump, and she wants to break up big tech. Well, I don't think it's going to happen. And the reason is, all of a sudden, this has become a geopolitical debate. I spend more time in China now than I do in Silicon Valley. And the Chinese digital giants are much superior to what we have in the West. Look at payments. It's fascinating to go to the US and still see people writing a check. My God. But in China, everybody pays with their mobile phone. I was in Shenzhen 2 weeks ago. I made the mistake of going to an ice cream shop, a Haagen-Dazs, and I have the ice cream. I took out my credit card. Big mistake. A credit card is an ancient payment mechanism in China. It's like going to a Carrefour and paying for your groceries with a camel or a goat. That's a credit card in China. And we're now seeing the world is polarizing. There's a tech stack from the West, there's a tech stack from the East, and what we have is a global fight. In the top 20 digital platforms in the world, 11 are US, 9 are Chinese. This is now a Cold War, and the Cold War is escalating. This is not a trade war, this is vital technologies, and I have 9 of them. These are the battlefields of the new Cold War. This battlefield is something that is happening, and we here in Europe are basically in between. If you look at the unicorn distribution, the startup activity around the world, there's a shitload in Silicon Valley, there's an amazing amount in China. Europe has basically missed the boat. We need to buckle up. And if you look at that, it's all about data. Turning information into value seems to be the #1 game today. But how good are you at doing that? And the recipe is really simple. If you want to connect the dots, you have to collect the dots. So this is the question. How good are you at collecting? How good at connecting? And we have to pick up the signals. Platforms and data is the game, and we're now turning that into intelligence. There's a lot of buzz about AI. There's a lot of hype about AI, but maybe digital is done. This is the beginning of the era of cognitive, and it's pattern recognition at scale. And I meet a lot of people who say, am I going to lose my job? You'll be fine. I've seen you walk in. You're old enough. I think you'll be okay. Humans are still the best computers that we can mass produce by unskilled labor. And that will remain so for a certain period of time. But we have to be sure automation is changing the game in a big way. We're now in a situation where if you see the advances in automation, maybe that is even more impressive than anything I've seen coming out of software. And we have no idea how it's going to play out. We've seen Atlas grow up 3 years ago. 3 years ago, it could open a door, and now it runs a parkour. And the fascinating thing, once one Atlas knows how to do that, they all know how to do that. So, what is this going to be? As an engineer, you say, wow. As a human, you say, oh my God. And I think the CEO of IBM probably had the best way of positioning it. Maybe only 10% of the jobs will disappear, but 100% will change. If you see the evolution, fascinating. This is just 10 years. Do you know what's going to happen in the next 10 years? Fascinating. We just have to be mindful. It's crazy to see what would happen if we torture these wonderful machines a little bit too much, because if at a certain moment you push them too far, it is going to backfire in a major way. People say, my God, what is this kind of world? Well, it's very clearly a world where your visibility gets less. We're more and more in a VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment. And we have more and more unknown unknowns. And I wrote a book, The Day After Tomorrow, which is a very simple way. How do you deal with that? How much of your time do you spend on today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow? And today is the 150 emails you will get this morning that you didn't know that were so important when you woke up. That's not the problem. The problem is tomorrow. Most companies look at tomorrow by extrapolating today. This is my favorite season of the year. This is budget season. I love budget season. Budgets are a yearly sadistic ritual where people put in fake news in Excel that is consolidated to something which never works. And then there's the day after tomorrow. New ideas, new concepts, new business models that change the rule of the game. How much time do you spend on today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow? Many people say 70, 20, 10. Reality is 93, 7, and 0. Problem is value. Today is very important. Tomorrow is very important. This is crucial if you want to survive. I wrote a book on this model, was very happy. Went to my first workshop. This was on a flip chart, and I bombed. The CEO was an Australian. He went to the flip chart. He took a big red pen. He said, Mr. Hinsson, your model is wrong. You forgot something. And he drew this onto the flip chart. And I asked him, what is it? He said, that's the shit of yesterday we have to clean up. And that creates negative value. And I rewrote the book with that in it. And people said, but I don't know this day after tomorrow. What can I do? And I think not knowing might be one of the most important things that you need to nurture. I only meet two types of people. People who know what they do and people who don't know what they do. And I would ask you here to please stand up if in your professional HR capacity you have no clue what you're doing. There's a lot of peer pressure to keep sitting down. But this man is the king of people who has no idea what he's doing. He's constantly doing stuff that's never been done before. If he wants to land a rocket vertically on a barge in the ocean with 9-meter waves, there are thousands of NASA engineers shouting, you can't do that. He says, I'm going to do it anyway. So how many people in your company do you have that know what they do? And how many people that are comfortable doing things they've never done before? And I've spent my life in startups. I've done 3 technology startups. And in a startup, it's simple. You have 99% people who are comfortable doing things they've never done before. And if the company grows, that number changes. You go to Facebook, it's 50-50. You go to Google, it's 80-20. And then I get invited by a bank. And the bank has 99% people who know exactly what they're doing. By the way, in an insurance company, it could be even more pronounced than that. But who are the 1%ers? Who are these people? The 1%ers are what I call positive troublemakers and frustrated enthusiasts. And I'm sure there's quite a few of those in this room. But you know what the problem is? In most large corporations, these 1%ers don't spend all their energy innovating. They spend most of their energy fighting the 99%. And that's the only reason how you can make a difference, and that will be a huge shift in leadership. We've built organizations that are too complex, with structures that don't work anymore, and it's fascinating, and then we do stupid things. This man became the most notable passenger on United Airlines when he was bloodily dragged off a United Airlines flight. It went viral around the world. And you think, how is that possible? And 2 days after the incident, the CEO of United went on national TV and he said, we did not provide our supervisors, managers, and individuals with the proper tools, policies, and procedures to allow them to use their common sense. Doesn't get worse than that. But how much time do you spend in your company in environments that are non-productive, not focusing on the day after tomorrow? We have to completely change that. And when I take executives to Silicon Valley or Shenzhen and we show them these startups, they go, oh my God, they sit on wood and they bring their dog to work. And they have meetings on ping pong tables. And more dogs. And they go back and say, we should hire more dogs. And I think, no, this is the time where you play the crucial role to focus on going from static to fluid, from the age of hierarchy into the age of networks. This is where you are going to focus on reducing friction in the organization. This is where you step up productivity. This is where you boost collaboration. And if you look at that, that transition is going to be on your plate. Information is everywhere. Intelligence is embedded. But you have to turn that insight into foresight and figure out a way to make this work for the humans in your organization. That is a journey. And the next 10 years, this is going to be our challenge. When you go to Google now, people only talk about this psychological safety, the capacity mentally to still experiment and even fail. This is the dumbest slide in the world. It doesn't work like that. This is what happens. Only by trying and failing and learning can you actually make a difference. I love this quote, I never fail. I either win or I learn. And I know it's easy to like, I know it's difficult to put it into practice. But we now know it's correlated to something called cognitive diversity. Not ethnic or gender, which is important, but cognitive. You know what? You put the same people in the same room with the same background, the same MBA, they come up with the same ideas. Duh! If you want to change that, and I believe this is a role that is going to be crucial. Attracting talent has always been important, but maybe more important than ever before. Skills are changing. This is the job openings of Goldman Sachs in October 2019. They used to hire economists and bankers. Everything you see that is blue is a STEM job. That is changing. But it's not just skills, it's mindset. We have to hire people that are going to be much more entrepreneurial and willing to take risks. But maybe the most important is heart set. How do we motivate a next generation to really be engaged and to really put all their individual into the collective? The challenges for you to reinvent yourself are fascinating. But let me end with something that I think is even more important. Technology is changing economy, that's on your plate. But it's also changing society. You're not just here as managers or people in HR. You're here as citizens, many of you parents. We now live in a world which is transformed by technology. And it's getting a little bit of an edge. When you look at it, when the internet came out, I was, wow, this is going to change everything. We will eliminate the middleman. Do you remember that? Now, we shop on Amazon, which has become the biggest middleman on the planet. We would set ourselves free from traditional media. Remember that? The reality is, we get more fake news in our Facebook feeds than ever before. So how are we going to cope with that? The tools of liberation that we hoped for aren't materializing. Do you remember our enthusiasm about the Arab Spring? My God, the internet would save democracy. But very soon, we saw that the tools of liberation became tools of surveillance and control. This was the most famous cartoon on the internet in 1999. Two dogs behind a computer terminal. One dog says, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Now, 20 years later, we know exactly what kind of a dog you are. Huh? I mean, even the CEO of Apple talks about the data industrial complex. So what is happening here? We're now in a situation where 50% of humanity on this planet has internet access. That is, wow! But how many of you are parents concerned about what this does to our kids? How many of you are concerned about social isolation as a result of this? And this is the sharp side. Discussions on transparency and privacy become fundamental discussions on trust. Who do we trust? This is what's happening. It's not just economy, it's society. And if you look at it, digital is just the beginning. Consumerization, urbanization, and globalization are changing this equation, and it's going faster than ever before. My father worked for Exxon his entire life. He was probably drawn into that world by an advertisement like this from the 1970s. You might have seen Mrs. Robinson. You probably remember plastics as the most important thing. This is the 20th century. This is the 21st century. We're now seeing that technology is changing society in faster ways than ever before, and some people can't cope. The Gilets jaunes here in France, but it's bigger than that. This is a global phenomenon where people are fundamentally concerned and sometimes unhappy about that societal shift that is happening faster than ever before. And it is going to be a big one also on your plate. Look at jobs. We have to stop pretending that technology is not going to destroy jobs. And what is the absolute or fundamental right to work? Some people are revolting. This man, Douglas Rushkoff, is my he's my nemesis. I mean, you cannot get more completely different from me than this guy. And he is actually saying it's dangerous to trust technology and innovation, and I think he's dead wrong. But we have to find a good answer. What is the individual and what is the collective? That is going to be something that we have to think about. Every year on the 1st of May, we celebrate Labor Day in Europe. And last year I was flying from San Francisco to Paris on the 1st of May, and I'm pretty much a capitalist, but on the 1st of May I try and sympathize. I try and sympathize with the unions. And every year on the 1st of May I have a ritual. I read something of a deeply red nature. That's my way of sympathizing. And on the flight from San Francisco to Paris on the 1st of May, I read this book by Peter Fraze called For Futures, Life After Capitalism. It's a terrible book, but he asks two brilliant questions. Will the future be a future of scarcity or abundance? Will we have too little or too much? Scarcity, we're eating up the planet, we're depleting our resources, we have plastic in the ocean. Scarcity. Abundance. Robots will take over our work, and we have more free time than ever before. So what's going to be? Too little or too much? And the second question is, how are we going to distribute that in a more equal or a more hierarchical way? Anyway, he comes up with 4 futures. When I landed in Paris, this was the scene in Paris on the 1st of May. On fire, like so many times. And when you look at it, the two extremes, what he calls communism, a world of abundance and equality, he makes a brilliant sci-fi analogy as Star Trek. Star Trek is the ultimate communist fantasy. We all wear the same pajamas, there is no personal property. And when he looks at the other side, which he calls, exterminism, a world of scarcity and hierarchy, he takes Elysium. And if you haven't seen it, watch this movie. Matt Damon lives on the Earth, which is depleted, while the rich and gifted live around the Earth. But the poor people live on a planet that is actually completely out of control. And when I go to Silicon Valley, and many of you have been there for the big conferences that are out there, I love going there. I love visiting Google and see the bubble in which they are living. I love to be at Facebook, and I'm awed at the buildings they are building and the complete environments for their own developers. But this is downtown San Francisco. In the highest concentration of wealth and innovation, the amount of homeless people and crystal meth addicts that are shouting through the streets is an absolute contrast to what is happening. Technology is changing economy, that's on you. Technology is changing society. And we're now at a point where countries are failing. Politicians have no idea what the day after tomorrow is, and we're not going to solve it with the same old thinking. With more and more unknowns, we probably have to do more. So let me end this with one final thing. Because in all the countries that I've had the pleasure to visit, there is one constant. When I talk about this, in most countries, the education system has become the slowest moving part of society. I call this oil rigs, prisons, and schools. This is a great example. This is the app that my 16-year-old boy loves to use. It's called Photomath. When I was his age, I had a discussion with the math teacher, are you allowed to use your calculator in school? This is a freely downloadable app where you can actually download the app, scan a handwritten equation, and it will solve the equation for you. This is of a different, not even a simple linear. You throw an integral at it and it solves the integral. This is different than, are you allowed to take your calculator to class? But it's fascinating to see that we live in a world, and I call this oil rigs, prisons, and schools, for the very simple reason is I still buy DVDs, and every time I put a DVD in my DVD player, I get a warning message like this, saying I'm not allowed to use the DVD in oil rigs, prisons, and schools. And I think it is brilliantly insightful of the DVD industry that they realize that schools today are in the same category as prisons and oil rigs. Education is essential, but how relevant is it for kids that are going to be born today that live to be 100? How do we inspire them for lifelong learning? How do we go from schooling to learning? How do we enable people to collaborate more? You are privileged bastards. Technology is at a crossroads. When we talk about disruption today, it is small potatoes to the disruption in the next couple of years. But whether it's going to be utopian or dystopian is up to you. And let me end with my favorite pickup line. When Steve Jobs wanted to hire a CEO, he hired John Scully, who was the head of marketing of Pepsi. And to convince John Scully, Jobs used the most famous pickup line. He said to Scully, do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to have a chance to put a dent in the universe? We're going to have to turn this all the way up to 11, and I hope you put a dent in the universe. Thank you very much.